The bitter December wind howled across the Montana plains, driving snow in horizontal sheets that stung like needles against exposed skin. Jack Harmon pulled his weathered Stetson lower over his eyes and urged his horse forward through the growing blizzard. At 53, Jack had weathered many Montana winters, but this one felt particularly cruel. He'd only meant to ride into town for supplies and be back at his ranch before the storm hit. But the weather had turned faster than predicted, and now he was fighting his way home through what was shaping up to be the worst blizzard in years. Through the swirling white, something caught his eye, a small, dark figure huddled against the base of a fence post by the side of the road. Jack pulled his horse to a halt, squinting through the snow. It couldn't be, but it was. A child. If this story of unexpected kindness is inspiring you, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to No Filter America. Your support helps us share more true stories that prove small acts can spark something incredible. Jack dismounted with a grunt, his boots crunching in the fresh snow as he approached the small figure. It was a boy, no more than 7 or 8, wearing only thin cotton pants and a jacket far too light for the freezing temperatures. Most alarming of all, the boy had no shoes. His small feet were an angry red, already showing the early signs of frostbite. The child looked up at Jack with eyes hollow from hunger and exhaustion. "What in God's name are you doing out here, son?" Jack asked, already shrugging off his heavy sheepskin coat. Lost, the boy managed through chattering teeth. Foster home. Ran away, don't want to go back. Jack wrapped his coat around the boy's trembling shoulders. "What's your name?" "Tommy," came the faint reply. There was no time for deliberation. The temperature was dropping by the minute, and the child wouldn't survive much longer in these conditions. Jack lifted Tommy onto his horse and mounted behind him, wrapping one arm securely around the boy to keep him from falling. "I'm taking you to my ranch," Jack said firmly. "We'll get you warmed up and figure things out from there." As they rode, Jack felt the boy's bare feet against his leg, and a tight knot formed in his throat. His own son would have been about Tommy's age now, if he had lived. The thought of any child suffering like this, alone in the cold. Back at the ranch, Jack carried Tommy inside and set him by the fire. He brewed hot chocolate and found a pair of thick wool socks and his smallest boots, still too big for the boy, but stuffed with extra socks. They'd keep his feet warm. "These were my sons," Jack said quietly, helping Tommy put them on. "They're yours now." Tommy looked up at him with wonder, as if he'd just been handed the greatest treasure in the world. By morning, the blizzard had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that sparkled under the winter sun. Jack stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, watching as Tommy slept peacefully inside. The boy had been exhausted, his small body finally relaxing after what must have been days of fear and cold. In town, Maggie Sullivan opened her general store and greeted her first customer of the day, Beth Wilson, the local schoolteacher. "You hear about Jack Harmon?" Beth asked, setting her basket on the counter. "No, what about him?" Maggie replied. Curious, Jack rarely came up in conversation. He'd kept to himself since losing his wife and son 5 years ago. Sarah from the diner saw him ride in yesterday during the worst of the storm. Said he had a child with him, a boy without shoes. Jack gave him his own coat and bought the last pair of children's boots in stock. By noon, the story had spread through the small town of Pine Creek like wildfire, each retelling adding new details. How Jack had found an orphan freezing to death. How he'd carried the shoeless boy through the blizzard. How he'd given away his son's boots, the ones he'd kept all these years, unable to part with them. Emma Lawson listened to the story in the hair salon, her heart swelling. As the town's most active volunteer and head of the local women's charity group, She knew hardship when she heard it. A motherless boy, a grieving, lonely man, and the winter just beginning. Jack's been alone. Too long, she said firmly, setting down her teacup. And that ranch of his, it's no place for a child without proper things. What are you thinking, Emma? Asked Clara, the salon owner. Emma's eyes sparked with determination. I'm thinking Jack Harmon finally did something besides hide from the world. I'm thinking that boy needs more than just shoes. She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly in the town's community message board. Ladies of Pine Creek and surrounding areas. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring whatever you can spare, children's clothes, toys, books, food. Jack Harmon, who lost his family 5 years ago, rescued an orphaned boy last night and gave him his dead son's shoes. Let's show them both what this community can do. Meet at the town square. We ride to Harmon Ranch at 10. Tommy woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of Jack's boots on the wooden floor. For a moment, panic seized him. Where was he? Then he remembered the kind man with the weathered face and gentle hands who had found him in the snow. He looked down at his feet, still snug in the boots Jack had given him. No one had ever given him something so important before. Morning, Jack said gruffly, setting a plate of eggs and bacon on the small table. Hungry? Tommy nodded eagerly, sliding out of the warm blankets. The cabin was simple but cozy, heated by a wood stove that crackled pleasantly in the corner. We need to talk about what happens next, Jack said, watching the boy eat. I called into town. Social services will be coming out, but the roads are still being cleared. They won't make it till tomorrow at the earliest. Tommy's face fell, his fork freezing halfway to his mouth. Don't worry, Jack added quickly. I told them I'd keep you here till they figure things out. Outside, Jack heard a distant sound that made him frown. He walked to the window and peered. Out at the snow-covered hills. Was that engines? A lot of them, by the sound of it. He stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, and stared in disbelief at what was coming up the long drive to his ranch. A procession of vehicles, trucks, cars, even a few on horseback, winding their way through the snow. And at the front, a familiar blue pickup truck that could only belong to Emma Lawson. What in the world ... Jack muttered, counting at least 30 vehicles already, with more appearing over the hill. Jack stood frozen on his porch as the procession of vehicles made its way up his long, snow-covered driveway. He counted at least 50 now, maybe more. Behind him, Tommy appeared, clutching the doorframe with uncertainty. Who are all those people? The boy asked, his voice small. I have no earthly idea, Jack replied honestly. The lead vehicle, Emma's blue pickup truck, pulled to a stop in front of the house. Emma stepped out, bundled in a red wool coat, her silver hair peeking out from beneath a knitted hat. She was followed by Beth Wilson, the schoolteacher, and Maggie from the general store. Jack Harmon, Emma called out, her breath visible in the cold morning air. Hope you don't mind some company. Jack stared in disbelief as more vehicles parked, and women of all ages began to emerge. Some he recognized from town, others he'd never seen before. They opened trunks and tailgates, revealing boxes, bags, and wrapped packages. What is all this? Jack managed to ask as Emma approached the porch. Emma's eyes softened when she spotted Tommy, half hidden behind Jack. We heard what you did last night, she said. Word travels fast in Pine Creek, and we figured you two might need some help. What happened next was unlike anything Jack had experienced in his 53 years. The women, there must have been close to 300 of them, formed, lined from the vehicles to his porch, passing boxes and bags from hand to hand like a well-organized bucket brigade. Jack and Tommy watched in stunned silence as his modest ranch house filled with donations, children's clothes in all sizes, toys, books, school supplies, homemade quilts, canned goods, fresh-baked bread, and casseroles. Someone brought a child-sized desk. Another delivered a bicycle with training wheels still attached. "This is too much," Jack stammered, overwhelmed by the generosity pouring into his home. Sarah from the diner patted his arm. "Not from where?" "We're standing," she said. "You opened your heart last night, Jack. First time in 5 years. We're just returning the favor." In the kitchen, a group of women had taken over, preparing a feast large enough to feed an army. A smell of home cooking filled the house, something it hadn't known since Jack's wife had passed away. Tommy stood in the middle of it all, his eyes wide as saucers, as Clara knelt before him with a brand new pair of winter boots. "These should fit you perfectly," she said with a warm smile. "And look, they light up when you walk." As the day progressed, Jack's ranch transformed. Men from town began to arrive as well, bringing tools and lumber. They set to work repairing Jack's leaky roof and the broken fence in the north pasture jobs he'd been putting off for too long. Inside, the women had organized the donations and were now gathered in the living room, sharing coffee and stories. Jack found himself surrounded by people for the first time in years, listening to tales of their own hardships and how the community had helped them through. "Remember when my barn burned down in 18? Robert Miller was saying. I had a new one up in a week because of folks like these." Emma sat beside Tommy on the couch, showing him a children's book about horses. The boy who had been so timid that morning was now smiling, pointing at the pictures and asking questions. Jack stepped outside for a moment, needing air. The winter sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered land. He could hear laughter from inside his house, a sound those walls hadn't known in far too long. Sheriff Dave Parker joined him on the porch, offering a cup of coffee. "Quite a day," the sheriff observed. Jack nodded, unable to find words. "I spoke with social services," Dave continued. "They're still sorting through Tommy's situation. Seems he was placed with a foster family in Billings who, well, let's just say they weren't fit to care for a child. He ran away 3 days ago." Jack's jaw tightened. 3 days in this weather? Without proper shoes? "Yeah," Dave sighed. "The boy's lucky you found him when you did." Inside, Tommy's laugh rang out a clear, bright sound that pierced Jack's heart. "What happens to him now?" Jack asked quietly. As evening fell, most of the visitors began to head home, leaving behind a transformed ranch and a stunned Jack. Harmon. The kitchen was stocked with enough food to last months. Tommy's new bedroom, hastily converted from Jack's old office, was filled with clothes, toys, and books. The broken fence was fixed, the roof no longer leaked, and someone had even tuned the old piano that had sat silent since Jack's wife passed away. Emma Lawson was among the last to leave. She found Jack sitting at his kitchen table, staring at a mug of coffee gone cold. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, taking the seat across from him. Jack looked up, his weathered face etched with emotion he couldn't quite name. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Why would everyone do this? For me? For a boy they don't even know?" Emma's eyes were kind. "Because that's what community means, Jack. You've shut yourself away for 5 years, but Pine Creek never forgot you. What you did for Tommy," she paused, glancing toward the living room where the boy had fallen asleep on the couch. "It reminded every one of the man you used to be." Jack swallowed hard. "Dave says social services will be here tomorrow. And what do you want to happen?" Emma asked gently. Jack's hands tightened around his mug. "I don't know. I'm not fit to raise a child. Not anymore." "Looks to me like you've already started," Emma observed. "Besides, you wouldn't be doing it alone. That much should be clear after today." "Before." She left. Emma placed a business card on the table. My niece is a family lawyer in Helena. If you decide you want Tommy to stay, give her a call. Jack couldn't sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind, the parade of vehicles, the overwhelming generosity, the laughter that had filled his empty house. And underneath it all, the question that had lodged itself in his heart. What would happen to Tommy? A cry from the makeshift bedroom jolted him from his thoughts. Jack was on his feet in an instant, moving swiftly down the hall. Tommy was thrashing. In his sleep, tears streaming down his face. "No, please," he whimpered. "I'll be good. Don't lock me out again." Jack gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tommy," he called softly. "Tommy, wake up. You're safe now." The boy's eyes flew, open, wild with fear, until they focused on Jack's face. "I was back there," he whispered. "At the bad house." "You're not there anymore," Jack assured him, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're here with me, and no one's going to hurt you." Tommy's small hand found Jack's, holding on tight. "Do I have to go back to another foster home?" Jack felt something crack open inside him, a door he'd kept sealed shut for 5 long years. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he found himself promising. He stayed until Tommy fell back asleep, the boy's hand still clutching his. In the quiet darkness, Jack made his decision. Social services arrived the next morning in the form of Ms. Diane Reynolds, a stern-looking woman with a clipboard and sensible shoes. She raised an eyebrow at the transformed state of Jack's ranch. "You've been busy, Mr. Harmon," she observed as she stepped inside. "Not me," Jack admitted. "The town. They came yesterday." Ms. Reynolds conducted a thorough interview, asking Jack about his home, his finances, his background. She spoke with Tommy privately, then returned to the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. "Tommy has had a difficult time in the system," she said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "His previous placement was ... problematic. The foster parents have been removed from our program." Jack's jaw tightened. "They left him without shoes in the middle of winter." "Yes," Ms. Reynolds acknowledged grimly. "That's become clear." She glanced around the kitchen, noting the well-stocked pantry, the clean surroundings, the child-sized jacket hanging by the door. "You've expressed interest in becoming Tommy's foster parent?" "I have," Jack said firmly, thinking of Emma's niece, the lawyer whose number was now saved in his phone. "I know I'm not the typical candidate. I'm single. I live on a ranch miles from town, and I haven't exactly been social these past few years. But I can give that boy a good home." Ms. Reynolds studied him thoughtfully. Normally, there would be months of background checks, home studies, training courses. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Jack opened it to find Emma Lawson, along with Mayor Wilson and Pastor Roberts. "We heard Ms. Reynolds was visiting today," Emma said briskly. "We thought character references might be helpful." Behind them, more vehicles were pulling up. Jack recognized Beth Wilson's car, Dr. Thompson's truck, and at least a dozen others. Ms. Reynolds joined him at the door, her eyes widening at the sight of half the town arriving on a Tuesday morning. "Mr. Harmon," she said with the first hint of a smile he'd seen, "it appears you have quite the support system." Spring had transformed the Montana landscape. The snow-covered hills had given way to lush green pastures dotted with wildflowers. At Harmon Ranch, the changes went far beyond the seasons. Jack stood on his porch, watching as Tommy rode his pony in the corrala, gift from the Wilson family when the boy had officially become Jack's foster son 3 months ago. The legal proceedings for permanent adoption were underway, with Emma's niece handling everything. "Keep your heels down, son," Jack called out, unable to suppress a smile as Tommy adjusted his posture with determination. The ranch itself was almost unrecognizable. The weathered fence had been repainted white, Flower beds surrounded the house, and a tire swing hung from the old oak tree. Inside, photographs now adorned walls that had been bare for years, some old ones of Jack's late wife and son, now joined by new ones of Tommy and the community that had embraced them both. Every Tuesday, Emma came by with fresh baked goods and news from town. On Thursdays, Beth Wilson arrived to provide Tommy with supplementary lessons, as the ranch was too far for daily commuting to school. Weekends often brought visitors' families, with children Tommy's age, ensuring he didn't grow isolated despite the ranch's remote location. Jack had started attending church again, sitting in the same pew his family had once occupied, Tommy now beside him. He joined the town council, offering his perspective on local agriculture and water rights. And most surprising of all, he'd agreed to host the annual Pine Creek Summer Festival on his sprawling property next month. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Dave had remarked recently. Jack Harmon becoming the heart of this community. On a warm afternoon in late June, Jack was helping Tommy clean out the barn when they came across an old wooden chest tucked away in the corner. Jack paused, recognition washing over him. "What's in there?" Tommy asked, always curious. Jack brushed away the dust and opened the lid. Inside were mementos from his son's short-life baseball gloves, a favorite stuffed animal, a collection of polished rocks. Tommy watched respectfully as Jack sifted through the items, understanding their significance without being told. At the bottom of the chest was a shoebox. Jack lifted it out with gentle hands. "These were Michael's favorite boots," he said, opening the box to reveal a pair of small cowboy boots, well worn but lovingly cared for. "He wore them everywhere," Tommy nodded solemnly. He knew about Michael and Sarah, Jack's son and wife, who had died in a car accident. Their photographs sat on the mantel, and Jack spoke of them sometimes, sharing memories that made him both sad and happy. "The boots I gave you that first night," Jack continued, "they were his too, but he'd outgrown them. These were his last pair." Tommy put his hand on Jack's arm, a gesture of comfort that belied his young age. "You miss them a lot." "Every day," Jack admitted. "But you know what? Having you here, it's helped heal something I thought would stay broken forever." Jack looked at the boots in his hands, then back at Tommy. "Michael would have been about your age now. I think he would have wanted you to have these." Tommy's eyes widened. "But they're special to you." "Yes," Jack agreed. "And so are you." The day of the adoption finalization arrived with perfect September weather. Jack wore his best suit, Tommy a new button-up shirt and tie. The courthouse in Helena was packed, not just with the judge and legal representatives, but with what seemed like half of Pine Creek. Emma sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes as the judge made it official. Thomas Michael Harmon was now, legally and forever, Jack's son. Cheers erupted as they signed the final papers. Hugs and congratulations followed them outside, where a surprise awaited. A parade of vehicles lined the street, decorated with streamers and signs reading, "Welcome home, Tommy and Harmon family. Forever." "One more surprise," Emma announced, leading them to the town square where a bronze statue had been unveiled, a cowboy kneeling to give a pair of boots to a small boy. The plaque read, "To Jack and Tommy Harmon, whose story reminded us what community means. From the women of Pine Creek and beyond." As they drove back to the ranch that evening, Tommy fell asleep in the passenger seat, emotionally exhausted from the day's events. Jack glanced at his son, and marveled at how life could change so completely in less than a year. It had started with a simple act of kindness on a snowy night, a pair of boots given to a freezing child. Jack couldn't have known then how that single moment would ripple outward, awakening a community and healing his broken heart. As he turned onto the long drive leading to their ranch, Jack saw something that made him slow the truck to a stop. Parked along both sides of the driveway were dozens of vehicles. And standing in front of the house, holding candles that glowed warmly in the dusk, were the women who had ridden to his ranch that winter morning, the ones who had refused to let him remain alone, who had brought Tommy into his life, who had shown him that family could be lost and found again. Among them stood Sarah from the diner, holding a cake, Beth Wilson with balloons, Maggie from the general store with wrapped packages, and at the front, Emma Lawson, smiling with tears in her eyes. Tommy stirred beside him. "Are we home?" he asked sleepily. Jack looked at his son, then at the people waiting to welcome them. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're home. And now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Why do you think 300 women showed up the next morning? Share your ideas in the comments below. And don't forget, like this video, subscribe to No Filter America, and help us bring more powerful stories to the world.